move on to our next panel. Is Harvey Rice here? I thought I seen Harvey Rice. If you want to come up, and you're going to be joined by Jeff Garris, Carol Rogers, and Kasime. And before we get to our actual third panel, Mr. Rice was, I want you to go first because it's a kind of a continuing of the conversation on our last panel, and then we will start with our next speakers. So if you state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, please.
Harvey Rice. Good afternoon, Councilman Heenan and members of the committee. My name is Harvey Rice. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, or known as PICA. I'm here to speak on Resolution 170038 relating to federal and state funding to the City of Philadelphia. PICA was created by the Commonwealth in 1991 as an independent authority to oversee the finances of the City of Philadelphia, create a long-term financial planning process, and assist the city out of a financial crisis through a $1 billion bond issuance. While PICA bonds remain outstanding, PICA exercises an oversight and advisory role on the fiscal and budgetary affairs of the city. PICA was created not only to ensure that the city maintain a balanced budget and a responsible financial planning process, but also to foster sound budgetary practices. In accordance with this mandate, PICA has issued reports examining major challenges to the city's long-term financial stability. The resolution at hand seeks to assess the financial impact of state and federal funding on the City of Philadelphia based on immigration policies and others at both levels of government. Unfortunately, PICA does not have sufficient details or specifications on how the federal or state governments intend to pursue the proposed actions of withholding funding from the city. PICA is only aware that an executive order at the federal level and a proposed bill passed by only one house of the Commonwealth Legislature seek generally to limit funding to the city based on broad policies, including immigration. The assessment of the exact amount of funding that either the state or the federal government may withhold is a complex question that will require input and clarification, first on the part of federal and state officials, followed by legal consultations regarding the requirements of each grant in question to determine what funding may be withheld. To date, there has been very limited information communicated by government officials disclosing which grants may be affected. As a result, currently there is not sufficient basis to determine the amount of money the City of Philadelphia may lose based on the proposed federal or state actions. However, PICA advocates that the city convene finance and budgetary professionals, as they have previously done on other fiscal matters, to regularly assess the potential financial impact as federal and state actions develop, and to create a contingency plan as needed. In the event of a financial variance or a material change, such as loss of revenue, PICA would require the city to plan accordingly and submit a budgetary action plan that would restore the city's overall compliance with the 5-year financial plan. This concludes my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman, you have a question for Mr. Rice before we move to the next panel? Okay. Councilwoman Ginn.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rice, and I appreciate PICA's work. In particular, you know, I've often felt that it's been an important aspect for PICA to be not only helping the City of Philadelphia become more financially responsible, but also to be a conduit about our finances out to the broader public and particularly to the state. I think you heard me, though, speak earlier to concerns about SB 10 in particular and about the federal government. And in particular, what I think is important for PICA to do is not simply to punt on an issue that is too vague. I actually think that there are things that are happening within the bill that are absolutely unprecedented in terms of opening up municipalities to unprecedented waves of civil lawsuits that simply make it impossible for any municipality to actually consider itself to be even remotely financially viable if those were to go through. And in part, it has been really vague areas where, people who become victims of any kind of crime could then sue the municipality in which that crime took place, including the fact that we already have precedent at the federal level in which people who are held without detainers are able to then sue the county and the municipality for punitive damages incurred at the cost of unconstitutional detention and illegal, I don't know what you call it, like illegally holding somebody without any kind of a warrant. And because of that, and because we actually have figures associated with the Galarza case, do you not feel that PICA should be making a statement? I think that in part, Rob DeBoe made it very clear that he's never seen legislation that opens up municipalities to the kind of wave of civil lawsuits that SB 10 very clearly, even if it is very vague about what could actually be projected, the threat to a city like Philadelphia and to any other municipality in the state is that it is unlimited. And in part, I am asking whether PICA would take a stand and say that it is, one, completely unprecedented to open up municipalities to this kind of level of civil lawsuits and threats without regard for boundaries or anything like that. And second, that it's irresponsible for, it just cannot be responsible state action for them to allow to do that. And rather than simply tell us to make contingency plans on things that we think are absolutely financially devastating, doesn't necessarily seem to be the role that I hope PICA would play. Like, I hope PICA would play a strong role in telling the state, like, you cannot allow particular selective municipalities to be singled out in this particular way to unprecedented and certainly, in my opinion, ungrounded levels of this kinds of lawsuits. I think we would limit that, and that PICA would issue a statement around that if that were to be the case in other areas. So I am wondering why not say things like that and make that clear to the state that this is particularly dangerous to Philadelphia's financial health, and as a steward of the state, you need to let the state know that this kind of exposure simply is unprecedented and exposes us to a level of civil litigation that we cannot really, we can't protect ourselves from, essentially.
No, that's a fair question. I don't know if you realize, Councilwoman Gim, that PICA has been concerned not on this issue of civil lawsuits, but on the rise of the city's exposure over the years in indemnifications and lawsuits. So this is something that we should look at, and we will look at.
Thank you.
And because it's just an extension of our concern, how those costs have been rising, and how that money to pay for them is taken from other services.
And I think you've been particularly good on that, and that's why I would ask if you could, in particular, take a look at those elements of SB 10 that expose municipalities to that kind of thing, because you have been good on that in other areas. I was surprised that that would not be included, but if you could take a look at that, I think that that would be appreciated.
Absolutely.
And that we need that to ensure that our city and the state acts responsibly.
Anything we could do to put this bill, stop it.
Thank you.
We will be able.
How about putting it on ice? Is that right?
Thank you very much, Mr. Rice.
Okay, thank you. No other questions? Thank you, Mr. Rice. Thank you for hanging in there.